Well, welcome everyone to April's edition to Lakeside Chat. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the why I went this direction as compared to what we've done the last few months that have been a little more on the softer side, and why we've kind of done a pivot in terms of what we're talking about today. And part of it is a very what I would say is a very selfish element to why I've selected this. As the Director of Business Development here at Lakeside HR Group, I recognize as I start to look at my particular role of working with a small business, having been hire number 8 at an organization that wasn't 100% sure that they were where we were going to go from a sales role, say a business director role, business development role, account management role. And then I've continued to grow now into as the organization continues to grow to now 20 employees. I recognize that my role has continued to evolve to sort of expand and grow along with it. And I've recognized that with that being the case, that many other small businesses are having that same question mark around how do they start, how do they grow, and how do they expand their sales team. And so to that degree, in a very selfish format, welcome to Setting Up Sales to Succeed Lakeside Chat. And I've got 2 really great co-hosts that are going to be along with me today, Gary and Derrick. And I told them both that I am, as many of you who have been on Lakeside Chats in the past know that I get embarrassed when people do the long, obnoxious bio of a person. So instead, I let people introduce themselves. So Gary, do you want to go first? You want to talk a little bit about your role and a little bit about Pivotal Advisors?
Sure. I am a lifelong sales guy. So first job out of school in the 80s, selling copiers. Don't recommend that to anybody. That wasn't a great job, but did that, sold in desktop publishing, sold a lot of server storage networking gear. I was with a company that after that, right before we started Pivotal, that grew from $1 million in revenue to $400 million in revenue. And yeah, it was quite a ride. And in that trip, I went from salesperson to sales leader to VP of sales. When I left 11 years later, we were $400 million and we had 1,400 people across the globe. And I was running a couple different divisions of hunters. And then we said, what in the world did we do to scale this thing? In which my brother and I turned it into a business. So that's what we do now is we work with small and mid-sized companies to help them figure out how to scale their businesses, how to get system process structure in place so they can grow.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. And then Derrick, do you want to talk a little bit about your role and a little bit about Select Metrix as well? And obviously the relationship that you have with both Gary and with Lakeside as a resource that we lean into on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a similar story to Gary. I came out of college, went straight into sales, spent the first 12 years of my career in selling mostly metrology equipment used in PCB board manufacturing, that kind of thing, capital equipment sales. And I took a job in 2001 with a sales trainer who told me, you're now the assessment guy. And I was a psych major out of college, so I was like, okay, I can probably figure this out. So I started working with the tools, fell in love with that role, and eventually left the company and started my own company, Select Metrix. And that was 21 years ago now, I think. And my job is I'm the managing director, and I provide sales assessments for companies that are usually hiring salespeople or evaluating existing sales teams. And I work closely with both Lakeside and with Gary's company, Pivotal, providing assessments for their opportunities also. So I have a broad reach. I work direct. I work with other companies also. And again, 90% of my business is evaluating salespeople and providing insight for hiring.
Awesome. Derrick, I had no idea it was 21 years though. What a great story of longevity too, in terms of what you've been doing. And I have to imagine the evolution of just what assessing, the concept of assessments, as I think of how much our day-to-day has changed even the course of the last year and a half with how AI has shown up in so many spaces. I have to imagine the assessment tools have sort of grown and expanded in your world as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, let's jump in. Like I said, I make sure that we kick off because I recognize that each one of these events has both a mix of new and prior attendees. So if you're new to Lakeside Chat, and if those of you that are old timers and OGs to the Lakeside Chat setup, I just want to do a quick reminder of our rules of engagement. One, as I said in the beginning, this is a recorded session, so we will be recording the session, making it available for people in replay on the Lakeside website for people to download. It'll also be sent to you along with the deck, any links or references that we have or that get brought up either amongst Derrick, Gary, and I, or even on the chat throughout. I'll make sure that everything gets packaged up and sent off to you here in the next 24 to 48 hours. We do strongly encourage that this is a highly engaging session. So I want you to use every Teams feature that you have available to you to engage in the session throughout. So whether that means you want to raise your hand with a question, comment in the chat with a comment that you might have throughout, or you want to just, play along at home, please engage as much as possible. We recognize that the concept of this being a chat is truly with the idea that we want to make this as interactive and as underproduced as possible. We want you guys to feel like you're as much a participant as possible. But with that, positive discussion, genuine curiosity. One of Lakeside's value statements is that we are curious. And so this is why we're here today, is to sort of explore our own curiosity on this particular topic. Gary, Derrick, raise your hand, a right hand, and tell me that you recognize that you are not the foremost authority and that you are coming with any element of a true only right answer. We talked about that on the front end, right? The idea that that's okay, right? We're here to share information. This is a conversation starter. This is an opportunity for us to learn and grow and share from each other. And we recognize that especially the concept of sales is one of those things that is different every conversation you might have, right? Where somebody is in their process, what they're experiencing beforehand, afterhand, whether it's a pain they're experiencing, whether it's a need they feel like they have. We're here to sort of support and lean into that and learn as we go. So excited to have everyone here and excited to have this particular conversation. So with that, I like to make sure we immediately encourage people to start engaging in the conversation right away. So the very first question I'll throw at the room is, what's a challenge right now that your team has experienced when it comes to sales in your business? Are you struggling to find good salespeople? Are you struggling to close? Are you struggling to prospect? Where are you on your sales journey? Gary, I want to throw this one at you just because I know you're talking to sales leaders on a regular basis. If you had to consolidate those conversations into what you're hearing right now, what are you hearing? What are some of the challenges that companies are having right now?
The obvious one is all the uncertainty that's going on. There's a lot of people who are pulling back because of tariffs. They're pulling back because they're not sure which way the economy is going to go. Their customers are telling them, you know what, I might want to hold off right now, and salespeople don't know what to do about it. So that's a big one that's coming up quite often.
I would agree. I sit on a group with a bunch of sales professionals, and it has been one of those things where even in the table, for those of us that don't feel immediately directly impacted, we definitely feel like there is indirect impacts that are happening in just every conversation with regards to that word you said, in uncertainty. Derrick, how about from your lens? Are you seeing or hearing anything from the conversations you're having around what are some of the challenges you're hearing in this particular market?
Yeah, it's still I'm a little more candidate focused, less on the process side of things, but it's always a search for good candidates. And I think what ends up happening when things get a little uncertain in the economy, there's a lot of candidates who just sit down in their role and don't look to move because it's too risky. They think they leave a good job, they go to maybe a riskier challenge, it doesn't work out, now they're on the street. So they tend to just stay in their gopher holes and not come out till the economy gets going. That's what we're seeing right now when we're assessing candidates. A lot of my customers are struggling to find solid ones, which is probably an age-old sales issue, no matter what the economy is doing. But I think it's maybe a little more enhanced right now.
Yeah. I'm going to call out Juliet in the chat too, because I do think when you wear that CEO hat, you are often also the salesperson. And so you sit in both camps. So the idea of getting people in front of you, but getting the right people at the table, continues to be I mean, I feel like that's you can talk to one person, see the pain, hear the pain, but if they aren't the right decision maker, sometimes that can be a struggle as well. And Dan also called out the idea of finding the right talent to scale. And I think that that's totally fair as well. I appreciate that people are recognizing this element of sales talent, because that's obviously the direction we're taking this conversation today. But I think, Deanne, I love what you said there too, is the idea that finding sales talent that want to hunt and not just farm. Gary, I want to lean into that statement alone. What are your thoughts when you read finding sales talent that want to hunt and not just farm?
Yeah, I run into this all the time, and it's so funny. I'll talk to CEOs and say, if you're looking for a salesperson, what are you looking for? What's your criteria? What do you want to dig into? And I hear from the industry, good track record, good at relationships. They got drive, they got grit. They give me a whole bunch of stuff, which I consider to be kind of table stakes. This is a different talent. This is a different skill set to be able to hunt. If you have to be a good hunter, you have to know how to target correctly, how to intrigue somebody to get in the door. You have to know how to do really good discovery. You have to know how to differentiate from the status quo. That is a really different skill set than an account manager who's really good at maintaining a relationship, spotting the next opportunity, growing that account. So when you're hiring, you gotta interview for that. I tell this story all the time. I sat down with this company that said, I need a really good hunter. And when I got to the end and we were interviewing this guy, I said, his resume was impeccable. It looked awesome. And when I said, how do you decide who you're even going to target? He goes, well, I assume there's leads. I said, no, there's no leads. We have a really small marketing company, so you got to go find your own. So what would you do? He goes, no problem, no problem. I'm hugely connected, and I just work my network and LinkedIn. I said, LinkedIn's an awesome tool. How did you go work that? He goes, well, I contact everybody I'm connected to and everybody they're connected to. Like that's the friends and family network that runs out after about 90 days. Then what? Nothing. I mean, nothing. And when we finally hired the good guy, he's like, well, here's who I target. Here's how I get in the door. I got to relate to a problem. I don't just call, I network. I do this, I do that, the other thing. I'm like, this is not even the same. This guy's got the skill set for hunting. So as you're interviewing, the long and short of that is as you're interviewing, you interview for those particular skills. And they're out there. There's a lot of good hunters out there, but you got to interview for those particular skills.
Yeah. Derrick, on the assessment side, Gary, I'm hoping that Julie wanted to hear a little bit more about standing out, or maybe something old school that doesn't involve social. So I appreciated the fact that you went down that path. Derrick, on your end, on the assessing side. So again, I know that there's the tools piece of it from the assessment, but are you seeing anything in terms of being any sort of like things that bubble up as you recognize that hunter mindset?
Hunters, generally speaking, are disruptive. So a lot of what I talk to hiring managers about is, are you able to handle a hunter coming into your organization? Because they're not going to be the easiest to manage typically. The disruptive abilities they have is what makes them effective in opening new markets, new verticals, whatever it may be. But sometimes people just aren't prepared for what's going to happen to the team when this person comes in and starts breaking policy, going around things, taking authority that they may or may not have. That's all typical. Now, we can look for it with assessments. A lot of times, if you're familiar with the DISC, we'll see a high D behavioral pattern. The dominance comes out. But as a sales leader, you're going to spend a little time with that hunter, most likely. And you're going to have to set some boundaries and try and keep them between the pylons while they go about their business. And there'll be challenges, and there'll be, shall we say, energetic discussions with them. But generally speaking, the juice is worth the squeeze. Because you're going to get they're going to open new areas that you haven't even thought about going into, typically, if they're a good hunter.
I love it. Well, let's keep this conversation rolling. Thanks for all of you that are engaging in the chat. Derrick, you're already getting a full taste of what shows up on Lakeside Chats with regards to the chat function. I want to talk a little bit about where we begin, right? So I think about my role and I think about small business, right? Oftentimes the organizations that Lakeside's working with on a regular basis is I look at even what Juliet said on the beginning as being a CEO of an organization, and all of a sudden you're deciding, okay, we're getting to that point where me at CEO or me at president level, I'm starting to feel stretched in terms of me being able to truly lead or restructure a sales team or make sure. And at the same time, we all recognize that we could have the world's best product in the whole wide world, but if we don't have anyone to sell it, no one's making any money. So when we start to think about where do you begin, right? So we talk about even the titles that are out there in the vein of sales professionals, right? So we can call them an account executive. We can, Gary, you already said it, account management, business development. I'm one of them. Sales ops, right? I mean, some of the times you see organizations that want to start with the space that they want the process. They want the systems in place to be able to manage through the sales element as well. And then there's even just the idea, do we start with the sales manager position? Do I lead with somebody who can oversee and take the lead at the manager level and then let them, be a player coach approach until we get to a role? Gary, Derrick, I'd love to get your opinion on and you think about where to start. Do you give advice? Gary, I'm going to start with you. Do you give advice in terms of where organizations should consider starting in a small business space, or are there elements that they should be thinking about when they make that decision one way or the other?
Yeah, and there's no one size fits all on this one. It's different for every company, and the abilities of that CEO to start adding people on. A lot of people want to add on a sales leader right away. If you're a small company and you're bringing on a sales leader, by the way, most sales leaders are either leaders or they're sellers. Player coach is a really, really hard job. And if you are the CEO and you're bringing on a sales leader, you almost have to have them produce revenue to have them even pay for themselves. And that's a really sucky job. It's to be a seller, and then you're also trying to build a team at the same time. It's really hard. I went through that at one point at my last job, and I said, this is stupid. I'm either ignoring my team or I'm ignoring my clients. And I got rid of all my clients and gave them to my team so they could work them so I could be a leader. If you are just getting to the point where you need to go beyond yourself, start with a salesperson. Start with somebody that you can transfer your knowledge to, that can start generating revenue and start paying for themselves. That's where I would go. That's what I've done here is, I brought on additional salespeople on my team so they can start generating revenue. At some point, that's going to get big enough where you're going to want to hire a sales leader to manage them, because every CEO I've ever talked to when it comes to sales management says, I don't want to do it. I don't have time to do it. And I'm not very good at it. So at some point, you're going to want to hand it off. But just from a cash flow standpoint, I want somebody who can go generate revenue on their own before I'm going to bring in a sales leader.
Yeah. And there's a question out there that I don't want to lose sight of. So Derrick, I'm going to let you sort of take that to where with the organizations that you're working with. Do you see a starting point? Are you experiencing any element of a starting point?
Most of them that I work with are a little more established. They have a team in place. But I couldn't agree more with Gary. You have to start with revenue, because nothing happens in a company until the sale is made. So that should be the priority. But sales managers, sales leaders, they're force multipliers. You get a good one in there, they can have an impact on everyone on that sales team, a dramatic impact.
I love that phrase, force multiplier. So thank you for saying that. I mean, it's a good one. It's like a phrase. I hear it, and I know I need to hold on to it. So thank you for that one. Sure. I know we weren't in particular going to go this way, but I told you, guys, I warned you on the front end that sometimes we might take pivot. So I want to take Lori's question, and I don't want to lose sight of it. The question around compensation and incentives. It's a fair one, right? The idea of, as we talk about, if we can't talk about money in without talking about how we're going to compensate them for bringing in that money. So can we talk about when you're seeing the compensation differences, or how you compensate a hunter versus a farmer? Gary, I know this is totally in your sweet spot, so I'm going to lean into you here. Can you talk a little bit about how people are structuring those conversations in terms of hunter farmer, and even setting that up from the very beginning? How do you make sure that as you're thinking about adding these roles and you're recognizing it as a hunter, how do you make sure that you're also building a compensation or incentive plan that aligns to that particular direction?
Yeah, you're going to have to cut me out because I could talk about this one for like 2 hours. But,
we debated, right? We debated on going just down this path.
We talked about this, but
yeah.
Again, it's a different job. So what's most common is you have hunters and you have farmers, but what's most common is you have a lot of people who are kind of hybrid, who are doing both. I'll start first with the hunters and farmers. I want to pay them for the effort. So a lot of times we'll have hunters and we'll pay them, and we'll keep, like if it's a recurring revenue or it's a reseller who orders or a customer that orders a lot, we'll keep paying them over and over and over again. But their work is kind of done because it got passed to another team. That's wrong. I want to pay them really well on the front end to bring somebody in, but I want to sunset that. So they're aligned with what I want them to do. Our strategy is go hunt new stuff. So I want their sales to, or their commission to go away. On the flip side, I want account managers to not just get paid for what comes in. I want to incent them for growth. So if I'm just maintaining, we used to do this at my last company. If my account manager had a book of $1 million and next year they did $1 million, they weren't making any money. But if they went from $1 million to 1.5 million, they got paid pretty well on that extra $500,000 because that was aligned with what the strategy was overall. The hard part is the hybrid who is supposed to do some hunting and some farming, and it never works out. They always migrate to the farming, but pay them differently. If you really want them to go hunt new accounts in addition to the maintaining the accounts that they have, pay them a different rate. So you pay them higher on the hunting ones and lower on the existing ones. And any salesperson can look at that and go, oh, I make more money doing that. I should do that. Again, I could go on for a long time on this, but don't pay them the same way. Too many times I go in there and they say, I just wish my guys would hunt. And I go, well, how do you pay them? They're like, well, I pay them X% on anything they bring in. I'm like, whether it's new or existing or, yep. I'm like, well, they're going to gravitate to what they like best or what's most comfortable for them. So pay them differently.
Or what's easiest.
Yeah. Yep.
Sometimes it's just what's easiest, right? I feel like I go back to my old sales trainer days, and that was always, there was always this element, and it was always the thing I appreciated and at the same time like hated about the new salespeople is they looked for the loophole, right? There's an element of if you look at that sort of, eager person, they understand their contracts, they understand their loopholes too, in terms of where can they make their most money and what is the lowest hanging fruit. And so if you establish low hanging fruit that really compensates and brings in the most revenue, then that's where they'll focus their time and energy as well. But I do think salespeople can get really thoughtful. I'm going to give them the word thoughtful instead of a negative word around how they can make sure they're managing to their comp plan. And I also want to just call out one other thing that you said there, Gary. And I think that it's the it depends answer, but it's the it depends in terms of what is the sales process, right? Are you selling a recurring revenue? Are you selling a widget? Are you selling a SaaS-based model? Are you selling a professional service? Those elements all have a direct implication in terms of how that comp plan should be structured as well. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for this. I love Lakeside Chat. This is exactly what I wanted to happen. All right. So I want to go back to the room. You guys have been great on the chat, but I want to ask one more because many of you mentioned the idea of finding talent. And I think that that's the direction we want to talk a little bit more about today is that concept of the talent element. Getting people in, getting them a comp plan is a part of it, but you have to find them first on the front end. And so I want to talk to you about the confidence level that you have in terms of evaluating sales candidates. And I say this with the idea that similar to what I just said, right? Salespeople are smart and they're good communicators usually, and they're people that they are in. If they are a good salesperson, they are usually in a place where they can sell somebody to hire them too, right? They're getting sold. They have to sell themselves first to get in the door. So I want to just talk a little bit about this evaluation piece of it, Derrick. In the term of confidence, right? Oftentimes people are coming to you or companies are coming to you when they are needing to feel more confident. What conversations are you having around this element of confident building when it comes to making that decision to finally pull the trigger and hire that salesperson?
Yeah, I usually talk to them about 3 components to successful hiring. And one of them is the 3 parts of a piece of pie, of a whole pie, if you will. One of them is knowing if the person has the experience that would transfer over to what you need done. There's transferable skills out there. You can find them. That's 1/3 of it. The other third is how you feel they'll fit culturally into the team, how you see them performing at the company. And then the third part, the third piece, that is where I live, is the evaluation of the assessment. What I always tell people is a lot of times people can get fooled by, quote unquote, bad salespeople. who have enough skill to get through your hiring process, but they can't deliver the sales once they're on board. That's an expensive lesson. So what I try to tell them is the third of the piece of pie that I provide is the most objective piece, and it is the computer running an evaluation on where their skills are, what motivates them, what's their disk format, disk style, what kind of aptitudes they have for growth. Hopefully that third can give them that little nudge of confidence, shall we say, that they've got the right person identified. The nice thing about the assessments, of course, is it carries over once you make the hires. Now you kind of have a bit of a roadmap on how to deal with this new salesperson, where they need help, where they're strong, what positions to put them in right away, and see how they can perform. But it's tricky, right? I mean, it's hiring salespeople, even with assessments, is still a tricky business. It takes a lot of evaluating, a lot of discussion to find the right one.
Gary, I know you and I, we're gonna go down this path as we sort of go through this myth buster element. So let's jump into that part of it where the engagement went down. So I want to keep it rolling. So I want to go down this path. We're going to continue this journey. Notice my use of a we start with a roadmap and now we're on the street walking. But facts and myths. So we talk about the idea of even as I was doing my research in terms of getting myself comfortable with this particular topic around what makes a good salesperson. And so let's talk through a couple of these facts, myths that we hear about in the world. First one, I am an off the chart extrovert. I am as far E. Everyone's surprised, right? I'm seeing everybody, even if your cameras are off, everyone's eyes just got super surprised. If anyone's ever met me, I am as far off I've taken Myers-Briggs probably 6 times in my life. Every single time, 100% extrovert. So I must be a really good salesperson, right? Best salespeople are extroverts. Gary, thoughts on this?
I will say most salespeople are going to fall into the extrovert category. They're going to be I over D if you're into your disc stuff. You're going to see that most often. Doesn't mean they're the best. That's where most of them are. Don't be so surprised, Erin. A lot of them are. I would say the best salespeople are the ones that are most inquisitive and ask the best questions, and they're really seeking to understand. You don't have to be an extrovert to do that. I've seen some of the best sales conversations where they sit and they go, really, that's interesting. Tell me more. Oh, wow, that's why did that happen? I mean, they're not talking a lot. They're not being out there really good at listening for the right things. You don't have to be an extrovert to do that. Again, caveat, most salespeople do fall into that extrovert category.
Yeah. Derrick, you on the assessment side, I know that you don't do Myers-Briggs per se, but is there anything you're assessing in terms of determining extrovert, introvert?
Yeah, we use a disc, which has been around almost 100 years, and that'll tell us, as Gary mentioned, the I over D is the fully extroverted profile on the disc. And certainly that's the most common sales style we see through the assessing. But it's true, introverts can be a high S can be a very effective salesperson, especially if you have a relationship sale or a long sales cycle. The S has got that bulldog mentality. They'll hang in there and they'll keep working it. Sometimes the extroverts, they kind of flutter away and go to the next new shiny thing that might be more intriguing. Whereas the S tends to have that ability to hang in there. And so the best sales teams we see typically have a variety of salespeople styles, a blend of introverts and extroverts. It's certainly going to fall to the extroverted side, like Gary said, for numbers, but best teams have a variety amongst them.
Perfect. All right, we're going to move on to the next myth. Past performance predicts future success. So I used to be a sales trainer and I've been a facilitator. One of the things I used to train was DDI. And I know we've got a number of HR people in the space where you ask those questions around, tell me a time when you ... right? You're looking for experiential conversations in the process to understand if whether or not they've had that opportunity to learn from and they have a result to be able to share as a result of their experience. What do you guys experience? Derrick, I want to start with you on this one. Past performance predicts future success. What are your thoughts here?
I think this comes down to the sale itself. At least that's what we look at. If they're coming from a similar sales model, longer sales cycle, multiple people to sell to, whatever, you can find transferable skill. But generally speaking, I think I'd want to know a little bit more about what they're doing in their day-to-day activity, and how competitive is their sale? How many competitors are they going up against? Are they a high value solution? Are they a low value quick turn solution? All those things play into determining. You can't just take someone who, oh, they're in our industry and they're successful. That rarely works out. I think you got to peel that onion a little and find out exactly what were they doing and does that transfer to our sale?
Yeah, we'll hold that industry question for, I think we might have that one coming up. But Gary, what are your thoughts on this one? Past performance. Are you encouraging people interview based on their previous experience?
I love behavioral interviewing. I think that's completely appropriate, but I also agree with what Derrick said, is you got to be specific about what past performance you're talking about. Is it past performance just in general sales? That's a crappy indicator. If you're looking at past performance when it comes to generating meetings and giving you a time, tell me about how you get into accounts and what's been successful for you, because that's a skill that you've defined. Or if you're talking about selling to enterprise accounts or being an account manager for enterprise accounts, what has been you tell me how you've grown existing accounts. What have you done in the past, and why did you come up with that? And you're asking them their past performance for a specific skill that you've identified that they need. I made the mistake when I was a young manager. I thought I was so smart. I hired my competitor's biggest or their top sales guy away. This guy was nipping at my heels all the time. I just totally ticked me off. So I said, I'm going to hire him away, and I brought him in. And he was their top guy, and I went through the whole process, brought him in, and I said, okay, you work for me now, and you've been super successful. So tell me, how have you been successful selling against us? He goes, well, I basically tell everybody that we do what you do, but we're cheaper. I'm like, oh my God, why did I not ask? Why did I not ask that question during the interview process? Because every deal we were the premium guys, and every deal he brought to me was if I could just discount this boss. He did not have the skill set, what I'm really getting at here, of how do you build and differentiate? How do you hold your value in these things? How do you justify your extra money that you're charging for stuff? He didn't have that. And if I would have been questioning him around those specific things and how did you do that in the past and how have you held value and how do you differentiate and how do you justify, I would have probably never hired the guy. I would have been in a much better spot.
You can't just hire people based on them looking for, they had the cheapest option, right? The idea if pricing is the only thing they were selling on, then that's not enough of a good salesperson. I don't want to lose this question, and I know we don't get to it. And so are you okay if we guys pivot quick for a hot second? Because I want to get to Julie's question, because I'll be honest, Julie, I'm curious too. Curious to know if there's a system, I think that would be in quotes here, for a new in career salesperson to structure their week. Derrick, I'm going to guess this one's more of a Gary question, but if you've got commentary on it, we'll start with Gary and you can add your lens here. But Gary, new person, you see a hungry starter ready to get going, you want to give them a shot. How do you encourage people manage or encourage them systemize their week?
A few thoughts. From a management standpoint, I say there's nothing more powerful than the weekly one-on-one to set direction. Here's the things that you need to get done. Let's agree on what do you think, we call them MITs. What are your most important things that you need to do? And for a new person, that might be, I need to make X amount of calls, or I need to set X amount of opportunities, or I need to go through this learning session, or I need to do whatever. But we agree on a Monday what those things are, and there might be 5, 6, 7 of them. And in the back end next week, when we get there, go, how did we do against our MITs? That went well. Okay, we did well. The biggest part of any new person, getting them up to speed productive, you got to see them in action. You got to listen in on a call. You got to go on a call with them. Salespeople are absolutely terrible at self-reporting. If you ask any salesperson, how did that sales call go? How did that meeting go? It was fabulous.
Great. They all look great.
But if you sit in the meeting and you set a standard for what should happen in this meeting, what should get done, how should we leave this? What did we prep for it? How did we set it up? What did we do? How did we follow up? And then after the meeting, you sit down and go, how did we do against our criteria? It becomes a way different conversation. It's not, Erin, how did it go? Oh, it was awesome. I think we're going to get the deal. It's, did we set it up? Did we do our research? Did we get a next step? Did we uncover gaps? And just that check up, if we call it a curbside checklist, but we actually use a checklist and say, how did you do against this preconceived criteria? It makes a world of difference.
Yeah. I want to add to that too, because again, I've been in the space a couple different times where I've had to bring in new salespeople. I agree with what Gary said. I think that those check-ins are really important, and establishing from the beginning, small goals, big goals, right? The idea of like the idea of in early sales. I mean, everyone wants the feeling of the win is what everyone's chasing when they're in a sales role, right? But if you can give people little wins, that keeps them engaged and keep them excited. And little wins can be things like, I got someone to answer the phone, or it could mean I got a really great response, or I got the meeting, right? Like establishing what small goals are, I think is also another important thing, instead of just giving them this big quota goal that they have to hit in a certain period of time. I think keeping them engaged with small goals is the other thing that I think is really important. The other thing I'd add to that is teaching them the full process. To your point, Gary, the process of sales, especially new sales, is everything from prospecting and researching on the front end to the action and the activity on the back end, and getting your name, you're creating the email template, creating the talk script and the sell script. But I think it's not just that back end part of it, but teaching them the skills they needed to make sure that they're doing good research and prospecting on the front end as well. Awesome. This is great. All right, let's keep moving. We've got a couple more myths we want to debunk and discuss. All right, so Derrick, you went down this path already, right? We mentioned this already, and I think that this is a fair one. When we're in a situation when we're hiring the next person, and Gary, you talked about it too, right? Hiring from within your industry is a good predictor, right? If we can find someone that knows our industry, they'll make a good salesperson. Derrick, you went down this path first. I want to just sort of give this one over to you a little bit in terms of industry elements. Especially as you're doing the assessing part of it, you're taking that objective lens to it. How much does industry experience play into that?
I don't use a lot of it in what I'm doing because I'm using tools to objectively look at what their motivations are and things like that. So I tend to stay away from their experience in the industry. But one of the things I've seen with the bad hire, the hiring companies making that decision, they're getting candidates from their industry. And it's to what Gary was saying earlier, you just don't know what they're coming from. I had one customer I was working with, their top performing salesperson was quite effective, big time revenue generator. But when I got inside the company to help him hire another one, I found out he had one account, Target. And it literally 100% came from just Target. I thought, my goodness, if someone else hires this guy, if he can't bring Target with him, which is a big if, they're going to be in trouble on this hire if anyone hires him. Now, he wasn't looking that I know of, but that's what gets into my mind. When you hire from the industry, you really got to know, if you can know, the details of what they're doing in the industry. But other than that, I think it's risky to rely on it.
Well, and to your point, I mean, we've gone a different direction now that non-competes have gone away, right? We're in a weird, that has changed things slightly. And I say that specifically, but I think it's an interesting point too, in terms of how much of your clients can you take with you? Gary, what are your thoughts? Because I know you have some.
If you can hire somebody from your industry that meets all your other criteria, that's awesome because you can ramp them up faster. But just because they came from your industry doesn't mean that they meet what you need in your company. Are you selling at a CEO level, or are you selling at a mid person level? Is there 5 decision makers or is there 1 decision maker? Are you selling direct or are you selling through partners? Are you a big brand name? We made this mistake. We hired a bunch of people who leveraged their big brand name and we read nobody, and they couldn't get anybody to call them back. That was a unique skill. Do they generate their own leads or are they given leads? All of those are different skills. And if you define what you need there and they match all that and they're from the industry, awesome. But if they match all that and they're from outside the industry, I would take that over industry experience every day because they're matching the specific things that we need for our role.
Well, and I think it goes back to what you said on the front end, right? That element of curiosity. The idea of if you're somebody who can be curious enough on the front end to want to learn the industry, that can also be, sometimes that fresh perspective on industry can be a value add as well, because they're coming in with this new level of curiosity.
We helped a food company. They made food ingredients, and it was funny. The CEO said, I think there's 100 food sales jobs available, and there's 99 reps, and they just kind of keep, chicking around to the next job. And she goes, I don't want another one of these guys because they're all the exact same person. And we ended up hiring somebody, I think they were from like UPS or whatnot, but they knew how to sell enterprise accounts. They were really good at hunting. They were really good at doing their research. They were really good at generating their leads, and they came from a completely different industry. And we were able to teach them enough to generate the interest, get the meetings, and then bring the really smart food scientist guys in, and he kicked all their butts. I mean, he was just phenomenal. So you can hire from outside the industry all day long.
Yeah, I agree. I want to just call out a couple things that have come through on the chat. Dan mentioned knowing the criteria and using it to evaluate against each candidate seems to be the success model I'm hearing. So that
100%.
part of it is the front end of it. And then I want to just, in case you guys aren't following along on the chat, Jennifer makes a really great suggested question around the idea of when you're doing an interview, and that's tell me about a time that a demo didn't go according to plan. What happened and how did that turn out? So I think those experiential moments of being able to speak to both your positive and negatives and what you learned from those experiences, it's a really great opportunity to learn from. All right. This will be a quick one. You can spot a good salesperson in an interview. Derrick, I have to assume you have to, in your own space, sell against this comment all the time, right? People are just like, don't you just know a good salesperson when they're sitting across the table from you? Derrick, talk a little bit about the objective viewpoint in terms of what you bring, and whether or not you can spot a good salesperson.
Well, this is tricky because I never want to push back too hard against someone's intuition, because I've seen some hiring managers with insane amount of intuition on whether it's a good salesperson or not. But generally speaking, yeah, people think if I can get to the interview, I can tell if they're good or not. I would say that that's really dismissing bias completely, because we all have it and we all look for certain things. Typically, people who are more like us than not is generally the hiring condition people go into it with. What I like to tell them is run the assessment before the interview. Have that data in front of you. Do not share it with them, but it should guide your questioning to find out where they have strength and where they have potential weaknesses. And you can start addressing those indirectly in an interview. And then I would say at the end of the interview, with your intuition and the results you've gotten from the questioning, you should have a far better idea of whether this person actually can do it or not, because that's really what you're trying to figure out. Can they come in and deliver?
Yeah. And I think Kathy mentioned it too, right? That data should drive the decision, not intuition driving the decision. I want to lean into that second part of Kathy's question. So in the vein of you can spot a good salesperson, what are your guys' recommendations on the references and referrals piece of it? Are you guys encouraging people do reference checks, and is there a sweet spot for how many?
I'll jump in. It's a piece of the pie. I like several data points. I like the interview as a data point. I like the assessment as a data point. I like an activity as a data point. Make them do something. Salespeople are awesome interviewers. Sometimes the best sale they ever make is getting the job, and then they don't sell jack after that. They're really good at that. I like to make them do something. I want to see their written skills. I want to see their presentation skills. I want to see something about that. And references are awesome. But if you just depends on how you do the references how did they do at and go after a particular skill? Were they good at this particular thing? I'm always going back to what one of the chat people said earlier is that criteria. And I want to go back and, this is what the role is. Where do you think that they would succeed? What is the biggest thing you think that they needed to work on when it comes to X? But how you do those references is good. I like to check 2 or 3.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I know I'm looking at the clock going, gosh, this was the fastest 44 minutes of my life. I feel like this conversation's been great. There's a couple more we want to talk about. Sales is just about hustle and charisma. Gary, you had a visceral reaction to that one. What are your thoughts there?
No, it's about it's about having a plan and following a process. There's a study, CSO Insights does a study, and they say the top 5 habits of salespeople, and they studied and they took the superstars, and they said the number 1 trait is they do more planning than anybody else. They plan their week, they plan their account, they plan their year, they plan their quarter, they plan every call. They're really good at that. They're good at asking questions. They're good at losing fast. They're good at, there's a bunch of different things that they do. It isn't just about hustle and charisma. I know a lot of people who hustle and they're the funnest people to be around and they don't sell anything. So I would rather have a very planned, systematic, process-driven person who asks great questions than somebody who's got hustle and charisma.
Yeah. If you think about it, sales, this is probably reductionist, but sales is really just doing the right behaviors consistently.
Yep. Yep.
If you do that, you'll end up successful. But a lot of people can't do that.
Yes. All right, I want to keep rolling, but there's a question. I want to say, Kathy, I'm not losing your question. I'm saving it is what I'm doing, just so you know. All right. If they have a hunter, so we talked about the hunter mindset, right? That hunter personalities will figure it out. This is the idea of our kind of like the concept of leadership and structure, right? Kind of, if they know how to hunt, do you think they can do it? Gary?
The more you can define what your play is, even if you're talking about somebody you hired from the industry, from a competitor, whatever else, your play is different. You have to teach them. I hate that they'll figure it out. There are a very small amount of people who can figure it out. They're out there, but that's the purple unicorn. I would rather bring a B+ player in and you give them the play to say, here's who we chase, here's how we get in the door, here's the process we go, here's the questions we ask, here's how we position things, run this play works. That works a lot better than hiring somebody with a hunter personality and they'll figure it out.
All right. Derrick, I want to have you talk a little bit more on the prediction piece of it, right? The subjective prediction piece of it. This is your image, right? Your iceberg image here. And I want to have you lean into this a little bit and talk a little bit about when you talk about this element of an iceberg in the interview, what does this mean to you?
Yeah, a lot of times people make decisions. The icebergs to represent the different components of our assessment. The one that most people see is the communication style, the DISC. It's above the waterline. It's observable behavior. If you sit in an interview with someone, even if you're on the phone with them, you can start to pick it up. But the real decisions should be made below the waterline. This should not be your ultimate decision making. Knowing what their sales skills are, what rewards them, their motivators, what aptitudes they have, these cannot be seen in an interview. That's why we use the assessments to dig in and get an understanding of where they are on each one of those components. Now imagine having all that information going into your interview. Now you can have a much more effective interview and you can start looking at, well, they're not money motivated, so we can start digging in on that, or they don't have an aptitude for handling rejection, so we better start exploring that indirectly in the interview and see if we can figure out where they fall.
All right, the chat is my new favorite friend right now. So we're all here for Tia. For a hot second, we're all going to just pause and we're going to support our new to sales person here. So we've got Tia, who mentioned the fact that she's getting a lot of advice from others when it comes to being in sales around hustle, grind, hours to put in, and it makes her nervous. And I think that's a fair, understandable place, right? There's an element that sales can be a lot of fun, but it's understandable that she might be nervous. She wants work-life balance or work-life harmony. I like that word better. And does at the same time doesn't want to lose her identity into her job. Gary, Derrick, let's give Tia some advice here in terms of as a new to salesperson, how do you maintain identity and at the same time establish your process?
Learn from the people who are doing it well. Learn who to focus on. Work smarter, not harder. I mean, the easy way to say that. I see so many people hustle really fast, but they're chasing business they can never win. And now I'm constantly behind and I'm constantly trying to catch up. Learn who to focus on. Learn what are the best questions I should be asking. If your close rate goes up, you have to work less hard. You just convert a higher percentage of the deals you find. So if you're targeting the right clients, your close rate goes up. If you're asking good questions, your close rate goes up. If you're positioning things right, your close rate goes up. If you're getting committed, you don't have to just bust yourself apart and ruin your work-life balance. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. Fair. Derrick, any advice from our friend Tia?
Yeah, I would say focus on your strengths, because so many times we see people you'll have weaknesses. Every salesperson does. Those just need to be neutralized. A lot of times people just break their pick trying to make a weakness a strength, and oftentimes it's not going to happen. It just has to be neutralized. Find out what your strengths are and really build yourself around those, because that'll have the biggest impact on your success if you can leverage them.
I love it. Okay. One last sales or discussion question. The concept of ownership. Who owns sales success in your organization? Is it the salesperson? Is it the process? Is it the infrastructure, the game? I think there was a word you called it, the game, I think at one point. Or does leadership own sales success? Obviously there's, in my not so educated opinion, there's an element of yes, that's my answer. My answer is yes. They all do. They all own it. Gary, Derrick, what are your thoughts on this particular question in terms of ownership of success?
I agree with what you just said. It's all of it. The salesperson has to be responsible for what they do on a daily basis. So they have to own that piece of it. The sales leader has to be the one that provides them with, here's the play, run the play. If they're not providing the play and they're not providing leadership and they're not driving coaching or accountability, that's the leader's fault. So it's a combination of both. And I'll go a step up and has the executives, the CEOs and the owners set these people up for success. Do we have a strategy? Are we differentiated? Are we structured in the right way to allow the salespeople to succeed? So it isn't one person or one component success. It's everything.
Yeah. Derrick, anything you'd add?
Nothing I can top that.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, let's do one last myth, because we talked a little bit about leadership, and obviously we talked about hiring, but I do want to talk about that leader role a little bit as well here. And again, selfish. It's me just being selfish about what I want to hear. Good sales leaders were once great sales people. Do you have to be a salesperson to be a good sales leader? Derrick, thoughts?
I think you have to be a salesperson first before you become the leader, but that doesn't, what a lot of times people think is you have to be a great salesperson. A lot of companies just by default promote the number one salesperson to the sales leadership role, which is not an automatic decision that should be made. A lot of times we see great sales leaders are not great salespeople. They're effective in selling, but they're far better at running people, being in charge of the people. And like I said earlier, they become force multipliers when they can empower their people to deliver more revenue, profitable revenue. My take is it's not necessary that they be a great salesperson to move up.
I would
Gary?
I would say the same thing. It's not necessary. Sometimes it's good to have credibility, and I see a couple different things. It is a different job. Everybody promotes their top salesperson to be the sales leader. It is a different job. And I know when I came up, I was a pretty successful salesperson. I was good at hunting and getting in the door and selling and closing and doing all the rest of that. And that's what I was good at. And then they said, cool, you have a team now. Now your job is to hire, teach, drive accountability, forecast. It's a different job. And the hard part is nobody teaches sales leaders how to do the different job. And a lot of them fail and they go, oh yeah, you should promote your top guy. I disagree with that, because most of the sales leaders we work with, we're really good salespeople who got promoted. But when you teach them what does good coaching look like? How do you structure your week? How do you make sure you're giving people good feedback? How do you drive accountability? And they learn how to do that, they can be awesome leaders. And I've had people who come over from like finance who have the good leadership and the good structure and everything. And we teach them enough about sales where they can understand so they can provide good feedback. They can also be good leaders. So a lot of good sales, your comment on here, a lot of good sales were great salespeople. That's great. I agree with that if they get the proper leadership training and somebody teaches them how to do the new job.
Yep. Because I think there's like a big period at the end that they are two different jobs. One does not equal the other. You don't get, and sometimes that's the hardest part about moving into leadership, right? Is you have to relinquish that sales role, because now you are in a responsibility of the other people that are responsible to sell it. You can't do it for them. You have to encourage them to do it for themselves. All right. Gary, do you want to talk just in the last 5 minutes here? Do you want to take a quick second to talk a little bit more about Pivotal? And then Derrick, I want you to talk a little bit more about Select Matrix as well.
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more about it, this is our thing. We call it our sales operating system. I've mentioned a couple of times the plan, the play, the structure. That's what we do, is we help get in their strategy and people and process and everything. We do it in a few different ways. Sometimes we are your fractional sales leader. So if you don't have a sales leader, we assume that role. We're your outsourced VP of sales. We manage your team and we help build that out. If you do have a sales leader, it's what we just got done talking about. We're teaching them how to be a really good sales leader while we're building out your system. And then last, we got a bunch of people who are kind of familiar with this group format. If you're a sales leader, we have a peer group community just for sales leaders. And we get to help each other solve our issues or take advantage of opportunities. We get to learn best practices from each other. And if you want to learn about any of those, let us know. I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
And Derrick?
Yeah, it's like Metrix. We do sales assessments. We do assessments for other positions too, leadership, sales leadership, general employee. But what we do is provide you with over 60 pages of report information, which is a lot, and most people don't want to go through it. So I also provide you with a video where I walk through the high points of the assessment to give you the take on what I would be focused on if I were interviewing them. I'd want to know these questions. I'd want these questions answered. And so I kind of try and boil it down or distill it down to what you need to know so it can be more effective in your usage, as opposed to you becoming a assessment expert to learn about 60 some pages that you don't care about. So.
Well, and just so you guys know,
I want to give a shout out to Derrick on that, because we partner with Derrick on lots of hiring for lots of our different clients. He does a phenomenal job. Yes, you get this great report back. It's full of great information, but the way he breaks it down and analyzes it and tells you what to look out for or not, or what to dig into, phenomenal job. So hats off to Derrick on that one.
Thanks, Gary.
Derrick, you got kudos. There's a couple people that messaged me before that couldn't be there here who are excited to have you be participating here as well. So thank you for all you've done. I want to do one last pitch on the next Lakeside Chat. So again, thanks you all for being here today, this April. I don't know if you guys, this was quick 57 minutes in my day. But we'll be back here again May 20th. We're bringing back my friend Teresa Sandy. Kristen will be facilitating Taming Imposter Syndrome. So we're going back to the soft side and talking a little bit about that ugly imposter syndrome devil that sneaks into our brains on a regular basis, more often than I'd like it to be, and talking about how we can own our own success with confidence. So excited to have everyone back. You'll get, as a reminder, you'll get the follow-up, you'll get the link to the recording, you'll get a link to the next webinar, and if there's other webinars that you want to go back to listen to as well, we encourage you to jump in and download those as well. But with that, thank you, Gary. Thank you, Derrick. It has been truly a pleasure to get to work alongside you on this for this hour, but even in terms of preparation, I feel like I've made 2 new friends through this process as well. And now you can't get rid of me. I'm yours for life.
Well, that's a good thing. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.